I just know you're going to love the guests that we have on in this episode, so don't go away. Welcome back to the interview. I'm Dr. Rick Wadge. Again this week we have a special guest with Dr. Emilie Noteboom, and we finished last week, Emilie, by talking about this at length, and we needed to, some of the situations going on today with anti-Semitism and the problems with immigration in different countries that are bringing their own cultures and at times conflict in morality and ethics and behavior. And so with that having been said, you finished on a positive note by saying, but there are solutions. And so let's talk about some of the positive things that you are seeing that can take place, should be taking place, to turn this whole anti-Semitism around.
Well, as you've said, my name is Emilie Noteboom, and I work for an organization called the European Coalition for Israel. And the European Coalition for Israel is a group of Christian believers. And you know, when you love God, you have to love what He loves, and you have to hate what He hates. Mm-hmm. And one of the things God loves is His Jewish people. And so as Christians, we are called to love the Jewish people, and we're called to honor life everywhere, and to also not just make it only about us, but about our neighbor as well. And so this group of Christian people would like to be a voice for the Jewish people. The Jewish people and also Israel, they are amazing in how they are producing, and look at Israel as a startup nation, look at Israel as flourishing despite the threat that it's under. Look at Israel, it's also coming up with these new inventions and these cures for all these diseases. And I mean, all of us benefit from the inventions that come out of Israel.
Yes.
We're using computer and internet and iPhone, and they all have components that are created and thought up and produced in Israel. So there's lots to celebrate when we talk about Israel.
Yes.
And with all the good things that Israel does, there's one thing that they're not so good at, and they're not good at promoting themselves. They're not good at their PR. They're so used to being hated that they just shrug their shoulders and get on with it. And this is a little bit where non-Jews have a role, Christian people have a role, because we can be that other voice. And if you look at what happened in the Second World War, or even the lead up to the Second World War. So what happened is, in 1938, there was a conference in Evian, and Evian is in the south of France, not too far from Geneva. And so there was a conference because in the 1930s, the Germans started to tie the thumbscrew, so to speak. They were making life for Jewish people very hard. You couldn't have certain professions anymore. You couldn't sell your products to the general public anymore. You couldn't go in certain public areas anymore. So they weren't physically attacked just yet, but life was getting to be more and more unbearable in the 1930s, in the lead up to the Second World War. And so lots of Jewish people started to leave, and they fled to the neighboring countries. And then the best example is Anne Frank. Anne Frank, you always think of her as hiding in Amsterdam, and that's correct. And she wrote her diary in Dutch, and she was integrated in Dutch life. But her father, Otto Frank, served in the First World War as a German soldier, because they were Germans, German Jews, who in this kind of nasty environment that was being created in the 30s, fled to a neighboring country of the Netherlands for a better life. And in Holland, things were fine. There were no Nazis there. So it was a very good exchange. But lots of these Jewish refugees from Germany started to come, and not just to Holland, but to all these different nations. So in 1938 at the Evian conference, there was an international gathering to kind of discuss this problem of the Jewish refugees. What do we do with them, all these people? And different nations were there, Canada is on record as saying, we are not large enough to take them. Lots of nations said, we don't want to import problems, we don't want them. I think Bolivia is the only country that took like 40,000. That's the only country that took any Jews in, and the other country said, we don't want them. We don't want this issue. Sorry. So we know from historic records that the German delegation went home to Hitler and said, Hitler, we can do with our Jews what we want because nobody cares. And it is from that point on that we then had the Kristallnacht, where the first synagogues were being destroyed, the first lives were being lost, the first violence was perpetuated, books were burned. Just the kind of the tone was set, and there was no fear of pushback from international bodies. And from there on, of course, the ball started rolling, and we know, sadly, the end of this story. But the question is, why was there no one at the Evian conference to plead the case of the Jewish people? Because there was no Jewish organization present, and there was no Christian organization present. There was no one from the Christian community that cared enough to say, this is unacceptable and we will not have it at our watch. And so the Nazis could do what they wanted. And of course, if you look back, you wonder what would have happened if another voice had been there to say, not right. We might have saved millions of people.
So, Emilie, why wasn't there a voice opposing?
Yeah? Why wasn't there a voice?
Why wasn't there?
There is. I think that, well, one thing, now it's easy to look back and realize what was happening and the atrocities that followed. But they were so horrible, nobody could imagine that this was actually going to happen. So it's very easy to tell yourself, you know, this can be true and it will all work out okay. And let's just pretend it's fine. And that's human nature. We know from historical records that even people who were sent to the concentration camps, when they first got there, they thought, oh, it can't be this bad. So it's just too horrible to take in. So your mind just makes you kind of not take it in. So that's human nature. We don't like to be confronted with real evil. We just pretend it's not there. So, but, you know, this is history and we cannot change it anymore. But we can, as history is starting to repeat itself, we can make a change now. Because now there can be a voice, a non-Jewish voice that says, not on our watch. Precisely because the Israelis and the Jews are not so good at promoting their own agenda. We need someone else to do it for them. And to be their friend and to say, you know, this is, you know, it's not about me. I'm kind of an objective party in this. It's about this group, but it's objectively not fair what is being done to them.
Now, as you're talking about, you know, what took place heading up to the Holocaust.
Yes.
There was no rationale.
No.
So today, as we're looking at the growing anti-Semitism in the entire world, you and I off camera just recently talked about how it's also growing in the United States. It's not just in Europe, it's around the world. What's the rationale? There's no rational reason for this. There isn't like some kind of proof showing that the Jewish people, the Israelis, are draining society, hurting society in some way. You just pointed out just in your opening that they're adding to society, they're bettering society. So what is going on in the mindset? Is this, obviously it is not a logical thought process going on, but there's something more than that taking place. Would you care to comment on this? What do you think is going on?
Yeah, well, that's such a sharp observation, isn't it? Because this really is not rational. And the tropes that have been used against the Jewish people are very, very extreme. On the one side, there's been arguments that they are ruling society and they are kind of the secret dealers behind world events. And on the other hand, we have really, really extremely poor Jewish people, and they're also persecuted. So, you know, what is it? The wealthy, powerful ones or the poor, bottom of society ones.
Yes.
Why are both of them hated? You're so right. There is a totally irrational element to it. And what's interesting is it's a hatred that's as old as humanity. It goes back. We know the story of Esther. We know we've seen the pogroms that have happened in Russia. We've seen the Crusades where people would just the crusading knights would just murder a whole village for what? Holding, by the way, a shield with a big cross on it.
Of course.
Let us as Christians be very humble in how we deal with our Jewish neighbors, because in the name of Christ, they have been hurt and tortured and killed for longer than we care to remember. And our hearts would be, good towards Jewish people. But that is not every Christian in history or their experience. So it's a very good question. And I don't know why there wasn't anybody to stand up at the time. But that is a question that is now no longer relevant. The question is now, who is standing up today?
Yes.
And I have to say, America is doing a great job, because your administration, President Trump's administration, has assigned Alan Carr, who is a U.S. Special Envoy in the fight against anti-Semitism. So he's a specially assigned person under Pompeo to fight this evil in the world, not just in America, but in the world. So there is now kind of a movement of people standing up and doing something.
Yes.
And in Europe, there's one organization that goes into the European Parliament to plead the cause of the Jewish people. And it's the only Christian accredited organization at the European Parliament. And that organization is the European Coalition for Israel. And so they are an organization that wants to be that voice for the other. They want to, or that other, they want to be a voice for the Jewish people.
Yes.
And they want to come in and say, we're Europeans, we have made all the mistakes. The Europeans really are the greatest of sinners in this respect. We have made all the mistakes. But because we've made all the mistakes, we also have a kind of an authority to say, let's not make the same mistakes again, because we have made them. Let's now choose a different path. So the calling of this organization is to speak to decision makers, to lay out the situation and the facts, and to invite them to make the right decision this time. And you have to remember, people in when you see rise of anti-Semitism, you can put more guards at the synagogue or the little kindergarten, which you have to imagine. You bring your child to your school in the morning, your little 5-year-old to kindergarten, and it's like going through a bunker. Like, what kind of a life is this? But of course, it's better than being murdered at the gate.
Yes.
So governments are doing this. They're giving police protection. If you go to synagogue, there is a police car there and an armed bodyguard. And so there is this kind of force to fight potential violence. But it's not a long-term solution. It's just containing hatred. Whereas if you want to think strategically, you have to change the mindset of the decision makers.
How do we do that?
So you have to, for one, talk to them.
Yes.
And they are just normal people with a really good heart who are trying to work as hard as they can to better their world.
The Jewish people?
No, the politicians.
Oh, the politicians.
But they work with what they do, what they know. And what do average European politicians know? They know about Israel and the Jewish people, what they read in the papers, which isn't always objective reporting. They read what they've been told, so it's often colored information because, as we said, Jewish people are amazing at everything, but not at promoting their own agenda. So there's not enough real promotion of the truth. So then they are basing their policies on incomplete information and also just, what they have. Whereas if most of them are not believers, because Europe is very secular, so how can non-believers have the wisdom of the Lord? How can they might be smart, but wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord.
Yes.
And if you don't recognize that God exists, if you never really read his word or have never really been taught the statutes of the Lord, how will you have this wisdom? So we as a church, we have to be careful to not be evil and curse our politicians in criticizing all that they do wrong. We have also a calling to love them and to give them an opportunity to do right.
Yes.
Because how will they know unless we tell them? Because we're the ones who have a relationship with the Lord. So this organization, the European Coalition for Israel, has at its heart that it goes and speaks to decision makers. They're overworked people in the parliament. They mean well, but if we come in and say, listen, these are the facts on the ground. We are here to give you more information. Have you realized that such and such a situation is developing? We can bless them with information and invite them to make the right decision. And you have to remember, like most segment of the population, the 10-80-10 rule works. And what's this 10-80-10 rule? It's 10% of the people that you talk to, they are entrenched, they are against Israel, they hate Israel. Nothing you can tell them about Israel will make any difference. They're set in their ways. Then you have on the other side of the spectrum, you have 10% of people who love Israel. They're set in their ways. They will support Israel no matter what. Nothing you can say to them will change their mind. But then in the middle, you have 80%. And they are the people who've never really thought about it, or they're just kind of like, it's been not on their radar screen, or they haven't really had information. And they are the people that if you bring information and you bring the situation to their attention, they're open to being persuaded that actually, I hadn't considered that.
Yes.
And actually it is right to vote pro-Israel. And an example, for instance, is long time the European Union has financed education in the Palestinian authorities, because education is a European Union's value. And that's a good thing. We want people to be educated and to learn about the world God has created. But this education then goes through Palestinian textbooks that the Palestinians put together. And so the content of these textbooks is teaching little kids to, for instance, to mathematics or arithmetic, saying so many thousand Jews died with the first Intifada, so many thousand died in the second Intifada. How many thousand Jews died? That's their test for maths. So it's a kind of an example of a force-feeding hatred to little kids. And this is being supported and funded by the European Union. So most Europeans are not in agreement to this. So we then brought this to the attention of the European governments and the European Union and to wake them up and say, listen, should our tax money go to this? This is not in alignment with European values.
Well, I can't wait to hear what the result of that was.
Yeah, so actually it took us a long time to bring this to the attention, and it was ignored for a long time. And then right before takeover of Hamas, so when Fatah was still in control, they actually, the European Union stopped the funds for this, and their reasons for it, they cited word for word our arguments. So that is one of our wins that we.
So you're making a difference.
We really are making a difference.
And I'm guessing that people helping financially to fund your organization is going to perpetuate this difference making.
Yes, because of course, I mean, this is the real world. We need money to do things that we're doing, and Europe is smaller. The Christian church is smaller. The mentality of people is also different because we live in a more of a socialist world where our taxes are very high. So we are assuming the government takes care of things that in America perhaps you would take more ownership of taking care of yourself. So so we work with a very tight budget, little old ladies sacrificing their pensions to give to the good cause. But if American people would like to be involved, we welcome you to also pray for us, because it's in the end a spiritual world, a work. We want to bless the people we interact with, but we want to also have an opportunity for their eyes to be opened, so that there is a chance for them to choose wisely and to choose what is in alignment with God's purposes. And if they allow for their country to bless Israel, there is a blessing for them as well, because
Yes.
those who bless Israel will be blessed.
Yes.
And so we see our role as giving them an opportunity to be blessed by choosing wisely and choosing what is
Yes.
correct for Israel.
Let's give the website again of where they can go.
Yes, so the website is www.ec4i.org, and it's spelled EC letter 4i.org.
You know, friends, I'm not a TV evangelist. I've never come off that way. That's not my heart. My heart is to help our viewership to learn more about supporting the Jewish people, to stand strong against all the problems that we have in the world now. We can make a difference. You know that about me. This is a great organization to get behind. They're making a difference around the world. They're making a difference in Europe. And we know, as you watch the news, as you watch about what's taking place in Israel, as you watch the rise of anti-Semitism, that we have a real battle on our hands. But you know what? Not just a few people giving of their pension checks are going to be able to turn the tide on this. It's going to take all of us. So I'm asking you to really consider committing to making a difference and change the world around you. And that's what these TV programs are all about. They're about helping get the word out so we can all join together as a family, as Christians and Jews together, and make a difference in this world. So I'm just asking you, really, seek the Lord on this. Seek your conscience on what you know is right. Let's make a difference together on this.
Yeah, and if people are interested to be a little bit in the loop of what is happening at the European Union, I mean, we are the ones having a look behind the scenes, so they can get the scoop that maybe they wouldn't be able to get from newspapers.
By going on the website.
So go to the website and sign up for our monthly newsletter, and it gives you a monthly update of what is happening in the European Union and what this band of European Christians is doing to stand against anti-Semitism in Europe and also around the world, and to stand with the state of Israel. And the thing is, those who stand with the state of Israel, it's usually from certain values that you hold dear, that Israel also reflects. And in this, the European coalition is a natural ally for the United States of America, because America shares these same values, and you're standing with Israel. So in a way, we are also your friends in the greater scene. We are going to be on the same wavelength with a lot of your policies, because we share that core value that is expressed in our love for Israel. So that means at the greater scene of, for instance, the United Nations, where we are also present, when America votes for certain things, usually those nations that are going to vote for Israel are going to share those same values and going to be in the same kind of voting pattern. And so our role is also to be a friend of the United States in its international affairs, in the sense that we are a little outsider, non-threatening, because we're just small and European, and we are, not the big guns that America is, but we are saying the same things, and we are promoting the same causes and values that America would do. But it's different when a little organization comes in and shares arguments and reasons why, as when an American organization comes in that is threatening, that's perhaps there's a history maybe where, you cannot give them this because there's you need to give them this. And so we're actually also a natural ally for American interests. So if people want to be involved or just even find out more, go to our website and also learn that you have friends across the pond who are standing for the same things that you are standing for.
I love it, and I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I really am. As I've been connected with the Jewish people, and my heart is just theirs. They own my heart. It's good to know that others feel the same way. And that together we're making a difference. I always say our little postage stamp, but in that little postage stamp, we're making a difference. And it's the same for you. I'm sure you have Jewish people. I hope you have Jewish people in your neighborhood, in the schools, and wherever you are doing life, where you're shopping. And befriend them. and let them know that, you stand with them on these issues and that they're not alone. I think too often in the past we've allowed the Jewish people to feel all alone.
Yes.
And that needs to change. And I think
Yes.
when we think of Corrie ten Boom and Anne Frank and different characters throughout the years, Schindler, Arthur Schindler, there have been those bright, shining lights that have stood up to do the right thing. And I think
Yes.
it's time for all of us to be those bright, shining lights right now.
Yes, and the motto that we always say in our organization is, it's called the ministry of showing up. You don't have to be someone special. You don't have to have all kinds of degrees or
Right.
or special reasons why you are the one to do it. You just have to show up. And God uses the foolish of this world to shame the wise. And he can do with what we offer him, he can do much more than we could imagine. So my challenge to the audience is also to say, just show up where you are placed and don't wait for you to be like your neighbor or someone else. It is you that God will use in your little area. And one of the ways you can show up is to just speak the words. When there is anti-Semitism going on, you stand up and protect the Jewish people. And don't worry so much about the consequences or the results. Just present yourself as a living sacrifice and see what God can do with just the 5 loaves and 2 fishes to feed the multitudes.
Wise words. Dr. Emilie Noteboom, thank you. It's been a privilege and honor to have you on the set, to have you at ITVN this week. And it's been a real blessing. I know that you've been blessed. And you can show your appreciation. I'm not asking you to give us anything. We just appreciate that you're viewers, that you're telling your friends about Israel TV Network. But I'm asking that you really consider giving to this organization that is doing such an amazing job right now in Europe, making a difference to help the Jewish people and to help fight against anti-Semitism. I know that you will be glad in your heart as you look back, as you've given, that you've done everything you could to help our Jewish brothers and sisters. Till next time, shalom, shalom.